Hello class, good day to you all. This is GSP course 3201 and this is part of the GSP lectures, Logic and Philosophy. This part is Module 6 titled Logic as Principle of Reasoning, and this course is going to be taught by Zuliadeni Dahir Lawan from School of Continuing Education, Bayero University, Kano, and this is a first semester course in the session 2019/2020. And in this course we are going to look at two methods of logical reasoning, which are inductive and deductive method of logical reasoning. But before then, let's look at what is logic. There are so many definitions of logic, but here are two. The first one says logic may be defined as the science of pure reasoning, a way of reasoning or arguing. It can also be means science or study of careful reasoning by formal method. Ivan Coffey defines logic as the science or art of making a distinction between straight and crooked reasoning. Let's consider these two keywords that appear in the definitions: reasoning and argument. By argument, we mean that thinking or reasoning process characterized by the use of evidence and support a certain conclusions. When we associate logic with pure reasoning or careful reasoning, we mean the process of arriving at a conclusion through methodological reasoning or sound reasoning as opposed to crooked reasoning. There are two types of logic as a method of reasoning here. We have inductive method of reasoning and we have deductive logical method of reasoning. Let's look at one after the other. Inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning means reasoning from particular instance of a generalization to the generalization itself. It uses fact and example as specific information that serve as evidence or premises for a general conclusion. Let's take an example. Tight fitting shoes makes people's toys develop corn. It happens to my friend last Christmas. The woman was lying in the sofa whistling some familiar tune, hugging her baby and smiling into her faces. What we infer from this fact? She is obviously happy. Now the point to note here is that induction is mostly learning from experience. So you use the experience you have to make a conclusions. There are processes of inductive, which are generalizations, causal relationship, and analogy. We are going to discuss one after the other. But what is generalizations as in inductive reasoning? When we refer to generalizations process of inductive reasoning, we mean a situation whereby a conclusion is drawn about a group or class on the basis of a study of some of its members. That type of induction is called generalizations. Toulouse has a clear way of putting it. If in a series of propositions A, B, C, and D, if it happens that in the series A, B, C is found to be true, the tendency is for us to accept D as also true. But there is a problem with these types of generalization. The problem in such a case is that the sequence of the true ones may be a ground bait to lure us into swallowing the hook. But we have to note that any generalization based on a single instance or just isolated instance is not reliable. Let's take for example, a church pastor is jailed for rape, and this triggers of the faulty generalization the clergy these days are morally poor. Second example, we are in fact living in a man's world. Everywhere they are on top. Just see this ultra-modern hair salon, a women's shopping center opened the other day. All top people there are men. The first example has a problem because the isolated case of such a pastor does not give us complete premise to make such a general statement about all the clergy. Note that even when all is not stated, that brings out the sense of all, as in the example. And even when there are other cases to cite, it does not follow that all clergy are involved. We have to bear in mind that even millions of instances in most cases are not all. One has to be very careful with such words as all and the, and also the use of plural subject. Nigerian women are faithful wives. Using words like some and most of will help to eliminate this problem of generalization. Toilists also suggest other ways of expressing such situation, yet keeping away from self-involvement. Example, using there is a tendency nowadays for the clergy to be morally poor. This statement has not adopted the extreme position all clergy. Now let's look at the second example above. It concludes that the world belongs to man. What is the reason? Everywhere men are on top, even in the new company in question. But there is fitful about this reasoning. Why is that? The reasoning is working on the basis of causal observation of everyday life. And logicians advise against using this as premises. Causal observation of everyday. This is because they are unacceptable as good evidence for logical conclusion. In order to determine the reliability of a generalization process of induction, you need to subject it to tests identified by Jefferson. The first, have the investigations covered a wide enough field? B, are the conditions observed typical of general conditions, or are these special conditions prevailing only in the sphere of our investigations? C, are the statistics used free from some dishonesty? These are some subject that one need to subject any generalizations process to test, and this this test was identified by Jefferson. The next is causal relationship. This has to do with cause and effect. Some may choose to call it causal generalizations. The pattern of reasoning here is X has happened, B is responsible, when in fact and there is no relationship between X and B. The tendency to pin down an effect to a cause, is common in superstitious people. For example, breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck, and Mary's several unsuccessful attempts to get into a university began to find a reason. Who knows? She might have broken a mirror several years ago. B, a storm tripped a man over early in the morning. Some tragedy strike later in the day. That stormed. C, Emily marries a man with hairy chest. She finds him a wonderful husband, and she goes, all my female children must marry men with a hairy chest. Now look, this endemic curiosity to identify a cause each time something happens should not close our eyes to the fact no event or occurrence has only one cause. Events usually result from a complex of antecedent. Event usually result from a complex of antecedents. Note that a cause can be contributory, that is, it helps to achieve the effect. For instance, not coming for classes regularly may contribute toward failure, but that alone will not cause failure. A necessary cause must be there for the effect to come through. Another point is that we should be careful not to assume that two conditions have causal relationship just because they seem so. A hairy chest and the quality of being a wonderful husband may have no relationship. The third process, which we call analogy, this means, or this happens when we compare two things that are not naturally the same but have certain similarities. We are presenting argument by analogy. It becomes faulty analogy when the comparison is phrased too far. For example, examine the following statement and say what is wrong with the reasoning in each. Now we are going to move to the exercise we have, and this is where we are going to discuss the exercise on the handout or hand note, the lecture note. Now the first exercise, it says, the question says, examine the following statement and see what is wrong with the reasoning in each case. So you need to, I know you have already examined it. There must be a lot of reasoning there, and you are to identify what's wrong with the reasoning. The first exercise say, Onitsha is a horrible place at Christmas time. During the 1990 Christmas, someone snatched my handbag containing all the money meant for my family. Second exercise says, housemaids are a delicate set of people, especially when they are grown-up girls. They refuse to do things the way you direct, and before you know it, they are mistresses in the house they had been servant. Third exercise, my housemate is 19 years old. See why all the beating I received from my husband daily. And let's answer this exercise together. Now let's analyze each exercise one by one, and we see what's wrong with the reasoning. Now if we compare or if we consider the first exercise, actually the conclusions is false. It's a faulty generalizations, because a single encounter with bag snatcher hardly provide adequate evidence for such a conclusion about Onitsha. I hope you get the point actually. The second one is also another faulty generalizations. Watch out to see that the statements are not concretized. Every premises there is based on casual observation of the world of housemaid. Does casual observation provide proof? I think the answer is no, actually. Now let's look at the third. Also, the third is a faulty causal relationship. The maid is 19 years old. The man beat his wife daily. How does the latter follows from the former? I think there is no any connections. And this is all about the exercise. Now let's move to the next form of logical reasoning, which we call deductive reasoning. What is deductive reasoning? Deductive reasoning usually moves from a general statement to the specific. This is why it is regarded as a reverse process to induction, which moves from specific fact to a general conclusion. In spite of this reverse nature, both inductions and deduction usually worked hand in hand. What is the basis of deductive reasoning? The basis of deductive reasoning is what we call syllogism. syllogism is the basis of deductive reasoning. And what does this mean? Syllogism is a reasoning pattern made of 3 propositions. The first 2 being the premises from which the third proposition is derived. The third proposition is the conclusions. And every syllogism must be composed of 3 propositions, no more, no less. Let's look at example. It will either rain or snow tomorrow. It is too warm for snow, therefore it will rain. The second example says, if today is Sunday, then I don't have to go to work today. Today is Sunday, therefore I do not have to go to work today. The third example, I will go to work either tomorrow or today. I am going to stay home today, therefore I will go to work tomorrow. Now let's examine these examples we have, the first, the second, and the third. In each example, look at it very carefully. We have arrived at a conclusion from the assumption that some other statement called premises are true. For example, the premises in argument 3 are the statement, I will go to work either tomorrow or today, and I am going to stay home today. And the conclusion is, I will go to work tomorrow. And it seems to be forced on us somehow by the premises. But is this conclusion really correct? After all, isn't it possible that I will stay home today and then wake up sick tomorrow and end up staying home again? If that happens, the conclusion will turn out to be false. But notice that in that case, the first premises, which said that I will go to work either tomorrow or today, will be false as well. Although we have no guarantee that the conclusion is true, it can only be false if at least one of the premises is also false. If both premises are true, we can be sure that the conclusion is also true. This is the sense in which the conclusion is forced on us by the premises, and this is the standard we will use to judge the correctness of deductive reasoning. We will say that an argument is valid if the premises cannot all be true without the conclusion being true as well. If you look at the 3 arguments above, all of them are valid arguments. If an argument is not valid, we call it invalid argument. Let's take an example of an invalid argument. It says either the butler is guilty or the maid is guilty. Either the maid is guilty or the cook is guilty. Therefore, either the butler is guilty or the cook is guilty. If you analyze this argument, it's an invalid argument because the conclusion could be false even if both premises are true. For example, if the maid were guilty, both the butler and the cook were both innocent, then both premises will be true and the conclusion will be false. We can learn something about what makes an argument valid by comparing the 3 arguments in example above. On the surface, it might seem that argument 2 and 3 have the most in common because they are both about the same subject, attendance at work. But in terms of the reasoning used, argument 1 and 3 are the most similar. They introduce 2 possibilities in the first premises, rule out the second one with the second premises, and then conclude that the first possibility must be the case. In other words, both arguments have the form phi or q, not q, therefore phi. It is this form and not the subject matter that makes this argument valid. You can see that argument 1 has this form by thinking of the letter P as standing for the statement it will rain tomorrow, and Q as standing for it will snow tomorrow. For argument 3, P will be I will go to work tomorrow, and Q will be I will go to work today. Replacing certain statement in each argument with letters has two advantages. First, it keeps us from being distracted by the aspect of the argument that do not affect their validity. You don't need to know anything about weather forecasting or work habit to recognize that argument 1 and 3 are valid. That is because first argument have the form showing this in the screen, and you can tell that this argument form is valid without even knowing what P and Q stand for. Now there are several types of syllogism. These are the categorical syllogism, hypothetical syllogism, and the alternative syllogism. Let's take example of each. All university graduates have knowledge of logic. Vita is university graduate, therefore Vita has knowledge of logic. 2. If a student cheats in an examination, he is expelled. The student Bola has cheated in an examination, therefore Bola is expelled. 3. Either the car developed for a fault or the driver has an accident. The car did not develop a fault, therefore the driver had an accident. Now please observe that the first example above is a sound categorical syllogism in the following pattern. All x have y, z is x, therefore z has y. While the second is hypothetical or conditional syllogism. The pattern is if x then y, x therefore y. The third represents a typical alternative syllogism in the form either x or y, not x or not y, therefore y, or x as the case may be. The syllogisms we are going to define is a system of reasoning characterized by two premises followed by a conclusion derived from them. Generally, for a syllogism to be reliable, we must subject it to the following tests or the following conditions. Both premises must be true, terms used must not be ambiguous, and the form of the syllogism must be valid. If we have the following classical example, say all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. This is a classical example. There is what we call categorical syllogism. When propositions affirm or deny that a group of things is included in another group, partly or completely, we have a categorical syllogism. And there are four standard forms of categorical propositions. They are the affirmative universal, which is of the form all S is P, the negative universal, which is of the form no S is P, the affirmative particular, which is of the form some S are P, and we have the negative particular, which is of the form some S are not P, where S is the subject term, P is the predicate. Now consider the following examples. All females in this class are married. All men are mortal. These are examples of affirmative universal propositions. Now consider the second example. No females in this class are married. 1. No first year students are lecturers. If you look at these propositions, they are example of negative universal propositions because they are of the form of negative universal. Let's consider the next example, which says some students are workers while some housewives are kind to children. Also, these examples are examples of affirmative particular proposition. The last standard form we mentioned is the negative particular. And let's take example for it. Some students are not workers. Some housewives are not kind to children. If you look at the form of these two propositions, they are of the form not S. A categorical syllogism usually contains 3 terms, and each term appears twice. All men are mortal, which is the major premises. Socrates is a man, which is the minor premises, and therefore Socrates is mortal, which is the conclusion. The predicate of the conclusion is mortal, and it is used twice in the major premises and in the conclusion. The subject of the conclusion is Socrates, and it is also used twice in the minor premises and in the conclusion. What remains is the third term called the middle term, that is man, and it appears in the major premises and also in the minor premises. It must never appear in the conclusion for a categorical syllogism to be valid. Therefore, it must conform to the following rules. First, only 3 terms should be involved. The middle term must be distributed at least once. Never distribute the predicate or subject of the conclusion if it is undistributed in the premises. Restrictive or exclusive expression in the premises could cause confusion. Use only negative premises. If either premises is negative, the conclusion must also be negative. If the conclusions of an argument is particular, then there may be only one universal premises. By this we mean that if the conclusion is some or most one of the premises should be all or no. Discussions on the second exercise. It says identify the premises and conclusion of the following deductive argument and analyze their logical forms. Do you think the reasoning is valid? Although you have only your intuitions to guide you in answering the questions, but we are going to discuss the questions here. Maybe if you like, we can leave it in our live interaction to discuss the question. But what are the questions? The first question says Jane and Pete will not both win the maths prize. Pete will win either the maths prize or the chemistry prize. Jane will win the maths prize, therefore Pete will win the chemistry prize. If we analyze this example, we'll see that the premises are Jane and Pete will not both win the maths prize. Pete will win either the maths prize or the chemistry prize. Jane will win the maths prize. And the conclusion is Pete will win the chemistry prize. And this is a deductive argument. To say whether the argument is valid or invalid, we have to look at the reasoning there. Maybe we will discuss this in our live interactions. I will leave this for you to go and discuss these 4 examples to be able to tell whether it is valid or invalid. I know as far as the premises is concerned and the conclusions, you can easily identify them. But in order to tell whether the argument is valid or invalid, you need to analyze the questions very carefully, and we are going to use our analysis so far done. This is the end of the course. I hope you enjoy the lecture. If you have any question, feel free to visit the site and log your questions. you are welcome. We will discuss the questions, and I hope we'll meet in the live interactions soon, inshallah.